Anyone speak to this measure?
I do.
I will now recognize Senator Alma Francis Heyliger. Senator, you may proceed.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to say good afternoon to my colleagues, to the testifiers, to the people of this territory. When I was sworn in January the 11th, one of the pieces of legislation I submitted immediately was this piece of legislation, the Crown Act. As a young lady being born and raised in the Caribbean and knowing quite a bit when it comes to dealing with my natural hair, it was a journey. But what I also recognized is that not only was it a journey for me to deal with my natural hair, there were so many in my community and around the world and in the United States that were being discriminated against something that we were born with. It was being utilized as a way to separate. It was being utilized as a way to hinder people from advancing in their careers and even limit people when it comes to education. Bill number 34-0147 is a piece of legislation that is here to really put an end to the type of discrimination that has been used against Blacks and African Americans throughout this world. I am asking for the support of my colleagues today. I am not a member of this committee, and when this bill is put forward, I am genuinely asking for your support. For me, the Crown Act symbolizes something that can really, really be a tool to be a barrier to things that hinder us as a people. And when I look at all the different states that have continuously attempted to sign on, as of right now, there are about 14 states that have enacted their own Crown Act. Recently, up for this year, I think 5 states have already signed on and enacted their own Crown Act in their state. Also, there are several other states that are moving legislation such as this to end hair texture discrimination within their communities. And I too am looking forward to the Virgin Islands being a part of this movement. This is not something that just came up. For myself, when we first started to talk about it and discuss what was happening, I had open and candid conversations with individuals that wondered if this was even an issue here in the territory. As you know, our population is predominantly Black. But when we dove in and really discussed what was happening, we saw and I heard so many stories of individuals and people, whether they were children, people in the workplace, the discussion on social media that's happening, where people were very much concerned that they were looked over for a job, even here in this territory, because they might have had locks in their hair. You had children that were told they couldn't wear specific hairstyles because we were afraid that they might carry weapons in their hair. You know, these were the type of things that were being associated with hair texture and hairstyles of Black and African American people. And I am hoping that today, with the testifiers as well as my colleagues, we'll be able to push forward this piece of legislation as just a step forward in the right direction. We have a small video that I'm going to ask media to play for us, potentially to give you guys a little bit more of a bird's eye view as to what the Crown Act is doing, not only what we want to do here, but across the United States as well. Thank you.
Hair discrimination has and continues to be one of many controversial inequities members of the Black community face in schools and workplaces across the U.S. Many people have sacrificed education, jobs, and other opportunities due to discriminatory dress codes and hair policies. Now the Crown Act, first passed in California, is one step closer to becoming a federal law. It would prohibit schools and workplaces from discriminating against a person's hairstyle, such as locks, braids, twists, and knots. Companies like UPS are already changing their long-standing restrictions on beards and natural hairstyles.
I was at school. The principal told me that I had to leave completely and that I couldn't come back unless I changed my hair. They said that in order to wear my hair extensions, I would have to have a doctor's note. I felt like I wasn't worthy
that okay?
My hair doesn't have anything to do with my education.
So much of our persona, our bodies are policed on an everyday basis. It's time for us to push back and say we are more than our hair.
It's not just about hair, and people shouldn't trivialize it as such. This is a national movement. We define professionalism both in school and work.
Yes, I am Tracy Ellis Ross. I am many things, but I am the CEO, founder, and majority owner of Pattern Hair Care, Pattern Beauty. I'm an actress, I'm an American citizen, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, and this is Inheritance. It's a panel hosted by Color of Change where we will discuss how to support hair love and small Black beauty businesses. I'm joined by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who I call one of my friends, Representative Herod, and Arisha Hatch, the Vice President of Color of Change, who have all led and supported efforts to fight hair discrimination through the Crown Act. And by the end of this panel, who will all be my friends. This is a really important and necessary conversation. Black hair is a portal into our souls, and we think of the maps of freedom that were hidden in our braids. Angela Davis in our afro as a symbol of pride and revolution. Frederick Douglass, his hair as an expression of prosperity and perseverance against all odds. Black hair has been at the center of economic, political, and cultural revolutions, and hairstyle discrimination is an economic and civil rights issue. Grooming policies are arbitrarily enforced to prevent access to academic and economic opportunities for the Black community, a way to further negate who we are and where we come from. And the Crown Act is an essential policy, safeguarding the existence, dignity, and humanity of Black people. Many people have dealt with hair discrimination in the workplace and at schools. Only a month ago, UPS finally ended their ban on natural Black hairstyles. And there is still so much work to be done because hair discrimination is race discrimination. We have massaged love into our roots as a ritual of resistance, and we are inheriting the legacy of who we are. So let's just dive in.
It's just been our experience as Black folk that there has been so much trauma and hurt and harm that has been codified in lawmaking that this is an opportunity for us to codify, liberation. To codify justice, to liberate us to show up as our most authentic selves. Every Black woman has a story of hair discrimination, as do many Black men and non-binary folks. You have the overt in public cases, like a school just outside of my district that suspended 2 sisters for wearing braids. But then you have the coded language about what's professional and appropriate. In fact, if you were to do a quick Google image search of unprofessional hairstyles, most of those images would be Black women. So I think it's, we're here today because for too long this has become a conflated part of our experience as Black folks, and in particular as Black women. And, I currently am rocking a different kind of crown because of my alopecia. But when I was a candidate for Congress, there were many within our home community who tried to dissuade and discourage me from wearing my hair in a protective hairstyle of Senegalese twist because they feared that it would be a barrier to my success as a candidate.
Does anyone else?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's happening across the country, of course. And the reason why the Crown Act is so important is because there are so many people who feel like they can't be themselves in the workplace or at school or even in housing because of their hair. And that's not okay. And it really struck home for me when I was actually speaking about passing the Crown Act to a group of people, and a mother stepped up and said, my son used your bill to talk to me about being able to wear his dreadlocks. And I love him and he looks amazing, but I don't want him to be discriminated against. And I don't want him to wear his hair like that because he will not go far in his higher education. And to me, that struck me as the reason why the bill needs to exist. because we need more people who are able to wear their natural hair and who wear their hair however they choose to. I mean, in Colorado, we put a lot of things in the bill, protective styles, everything in the bill, because we wanted to make sure that people had the freedom to do so. But that mom is not going to feel safe or comfortable with her son wearing his dreadlocks until more people do, right? Until people start changing not only their rules and laws and policies, but their culture and recognize their discrimination. And I think the conversation around the Crown Act actually helps people to recognize their own discrimination.
We're back now with a movement to fight discrimination based on how people wear their hair. We've seen the stories, black children being forced to remove their braids, even having their hair cut without parental permission, allegedly due to a school dress code. Well, now a new bill could stop that from happening. GMA contributor Megan Wright is here with the story. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning. The legislation is called the Crown Act and helps to stop prejudice in schools and workplaces. This segment is sponsored by Dove, one of the leaders of the movement to get the law passed. I spoke to an Oscar winner and a young girl who are also joining the fight against this kind of injustice. Take a look. Curls, twists, braids, and locks. These natural hairstyles are popular in the black community. But many workplaces and schools have policies that discourage them. But there's a growing movement to hopefully change that. Filmmaker Matthew Cherry created the animated short film Hair Love. The 7-minute short tells the story of a father learning how to do his daughter's hair for the first time.
That was so much fun.
The film earning Cherry an Oscar and a platform that he used to introduce audiences to new legislation.
Hair Love was done because we wanted to see more representation in animation. We wanted to normalize black hair. There's a very important issue that's out there. It's the Crown Act.
The Crown Act is a bill that demands protection against race-based hair discrimination in the workplace and in schools. The word crown holds the message, creating a respectful and more open world for natural hair.
A lot of different ethnic groups, it's not even anything they have to think about. You know, they're able to, wear their hair how they want to, get up in the morning, go to work, go to school, and, nobody bothers them. For black people and people with natural textured hair, it's an issue.
Matthew Cherry is a spokesperson for our sponsor, Dove. Dove co-founded the Crown Coalition in 2019 to advocate for the passing of the Crown Act across the country. So far, the bill has been signed into law in only 14 states.
It allows you to have a resource if you're in one of the states that pass a law to have a course of legal action to try to help rectify the situation.
Like in the case of 14-year-old Faith Finity, who back in 2018 was told wearing braids violated her school's uniform policy.
It was my first day of 6th grade, and my homeroom teacher was going over the rules. And when she got the dress code, she asked me in front of everyone if my hair was real or fake. I just tried to, brush it off and tell her that, it's my hair. And then a little later, the guidance counselor came in, and she told me that I had to remove my braids.
How would you describe how you felt that day?
I was really hurt. I just didn't understand where all this was coming from.
She was denied an education because of how she wore her hair. And, that's awful. That shouldn't happen to any child.
Faith's brother capturing the incident on video and posting it online where it quickly went viral.
What's wrong with her hair?
And he caught me bursting into tears. And a lot of people saw it.
Faith is now a spokesperson for Dove, doing what she can to bring more awareness to the Crown Act.
Are there any changes that you're hoping to see?
I really want to see the Crown Act passed in all 50 states.
People want to join the fight to help Dove end race-based discrimination. They would go to dove.com/crown, and that will lead them to petitions that they can sign to help spread the word.
So, thank you. That was a short, 9-minute video I really wanted to share with you guys to get the crux and understanding of how important the Crown Act is and how it potentially can have an impact on so many people's lives. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence, and I ask my colleagues to please support Bill 34-0147.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heyliger. And point information, Senator Francis Heyliger.
I do appreciate the conversation we're having today. One of the things that I do in bringing forward legislation and the decision to bring this forward, it had nothing to do with nationally. I recognize that this was a problem here in our community after having several conversations with individuals that live here. And I'm going to admit, at the beginning, I said, but the majority of us are Black. So why would that be an issue? But when I started to listen, when one woman told me that she was passed up for a promotion in this very government because she had locks in her hair, that's a problem.
Yeah, we have a lot.
When you have a child that's being told that we don't want you to play in our little group at school because we don't like your hairstyle, that is a problem. It's a lot of things that because we assume that we have the skin color, we don't recognize that we do it to ourselves. So I am not going to assume that because we are predominantly Black here, we're not recognizing that these are issues in our community. We also have to take note that quite often some of the very people that employ the majority of us are not Black. And their requirement for their workplace at times causes issues for those that are Black that when it comes to their protective hairstyles. So we have to keep all of this in context. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heyliger. Senator Francis Heyliger.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon once again. I want to thank my colleague when he shared the aspect that he said no work or employment section was in the bill. It wasn't specifically spelled out. It referenced the section of the title that we amended. If you look under section 2 that says Title 10 Virgin Islands Code Chapter 1, section 2 was amended, adding 2 definitions. That is the section of the code that speaks to employment and workforce. And we amended that section. So that's why we didn't explicitly reference it. We went directly to the code and amended to include that aspect of it. And I just want to say that, once again, for me, I understand the national movement, but I also understand the issues that happen here. We have a way in this community of somehow saying if it's not happening to me, it's not happening at all. And that is not the case. And when you have 15 people in this territory that was elected to represent all, we have to be the voice and the ears of the people of this territory. So when I come forward on their behalf to push something, it's because I'm hearing their cry. So understand me. I don't stand here one. I stand here as the voice of many that are being ill-treated in this community because of their hair. And not because you don't hear them doesn't mean I don't. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heyliger. And actually, you may proceed with your questions. Senator Francis Heyliger, you may proceed with your questions. It's your turn.
Thank you so much. During this time period, I want to say thank you so much for coming and testifying on behalf of this bill. I want to ask Ms. Ajua, when it comes to the specifics as it relates to the bill when it comes to parochial schools, because that seems to be one of the major contentions and discussions we're having today. It is very clear, and we understand from my perspective, that because they are private entities, we cannot impose upon them. What would happen if this goes through the federal aspect? Because I'm not sure if you're aware, right now, Senator Cory Booker, along with several co-sponsors, have a Crown Act, and it's Bill HR 2116 currently moving through Congress to do this on a federal level. What would happen if that federal aspect now becomes law?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator. Yes, I am aware. Cory Booker is a very good friend, and I worked with him and the other members in Congress to get the Federal Crown Act introduced. So I am well aware of that language and that bill text as well. It is written in alignment with what I shared previously, in that it extends protections to the workplace as well as in public and public charter schools. I posed this question after having the conversation and hearing the concern of the Moorheads, and what my attorney, who has studied how the federal courts have ruled on this issue across the country, he conducted all of the legal research and developed the legal guidance memo that would inform the bill text, meaning what would become the Crown Act. And his response to that question around parochial schools is, I do not know the answer to that question. And he references as advocates may want to run the question by a U.S. Virgin Islands attorney who could better assess how private schools versus public schools have been able to regulate grooming policies in the past and what the courts have ruled under those circumstances. And the question that I posed was specifically regarding, and that was me listening to what I heard because I am not familiar with the funding situation. I was told that all schools in the U.S. Virgin Islands, including parochial schools, receive public funds. So my question was, does that mean that the Crown Act would be enforceable in those private schools? And the response was what I just shared with you.
Thank you so much.
To that specific question.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to make sure in sharing that aspect that this piece of legislation that Senator Cory Booker is also pushing through Congress. So potentially we do have the Crown Act not only in local jurisdictions, specifically states as well as territories, we would also have it on a federal level as well. So I am hopeful he is successful in his endeavor. What I want to find out from one of the Miss Naturalista, what are some of the conversations that you have here locally or you might have discussed with potential clients or anyone as it relates to natural hair and potential discrimination that they deal with here in the Virgin Islands?
Good afternoon, Senator. Yes, I think it's important, as you mentioned, the fact that because we're not hearing it, it's not happening because it's not happening to us. Myself, I've never been discriminated against. Again, it's my own knowledge of what I see beauty would look like. Now, as far as my experiences with customers who would come through the doors over the years, this is something that I see quite often. Surprised at that. And I would be surprised of some of the conversations that I'm hearing and the types of workplace that is experiencing some of this, about not having your hair conform to a set specific style. Again, these people are employed, but not by color who looks like us, but by, different nationalities. And this is where most times that I have come in contact with individuals sharing their experiences with, discrimination, not directly, but, indirectly. And it's something that no one has no board to go to complain. There's no way, no department that they could complain in reference to being discriminated against, not directly, indirectly. And most times it's, they throw it over their head, throw it over their shoulder. But I think that this is important of what we're doing here today to bring awareness, because it is happening, and it is happening in our schools, in our workplaces. And I think what this conversation that we're having today is a great one, a much needed one. And yeah, I definitely, again, I am in support of it, because not more so my experiences, but the experiences of my colleagues, my clients, those who my coworkers, whomever. This is happening all around us.
Thank you so much. I think my time was called.
Yes. I would like to thank you very much. Senator Francis Heyliger provided a point of information. Okay.
Thank you so much. I do agree with quite a bit of what my colleague said in regards to having testifiers that have data and or adequate information. We did reach out to education and the board, but they informed us they would not be here today. We asked if they could send some kind of letter to put on the record. It didn't happen. As it relates to us here in the territory and collecting data, I wouldn't fall short of saying that's a joke, because at the end of the day, throughout this entire government, data is very important. But for some reason, we pass legislation after legislation lacking data. And no matter how much we sit here, we reach out for it, we ask for it, sometimes we will never see the light of day of it. But we still have to push forward as legislators and make the necessary decisions on behalf of the people we represent. Let's take, for example, the Civil Rights Commission. That would have been a great entity to collect this data. But do you know what? It's been defunct for years because the people that have been in place in order to put people on these commissions, for some reason they neglect these different agencies and necessary boards in order to get the data, in order to do the people's work. So what should I and other colleagues do? Sit around and say, you know what? We're not getting the data we need, so we should not legislate. I can't subscribe to that. But I do agree that necessary information and data is very important, but if we cannot get it, we have to do what we have to do on behalf of the people of the territory. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heyliger. Inquiry, Senator Francis Heyliger.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Asamoah, if there was a situation with amendment to specifically specify public locations, public schools, would that be more amenable to possibly alleviate some of the concerns of my colleagues that just by leaving it open as we continue on this journey to ultimately end discrimination in the entire territory? Because even though we have to potentially do what we have to do to get the bill passed, I still do not think it's a good thing when we have parochial schools and other places still discriminating against children because of their hairstyles.
Thank you so much for the question. I will speak specifically in terms of my experience, not as an expert in law in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The way we have used that language intentionally, again, just to reiterate that we want to ensure that the bill can withstand any scrutiny. So if you were to spell out in the workplaces and in educational settings as, defined as, public and public charters, I would suggest that that is consistent with what we've seen and that would suffice. The reason, again, that the bill text has not specified private schools is because of what I've shared, the enforceability, and we don't want to have a bill passed that is not in turn enforceable. And the reason is because some of the parochial schools and some of the other private institutions can claim exemptions based on religion, which is a completely different class. If I may, Senator, just add a couple of points because I do have to jump, and I'm happy to answer any other questions and to have this conversation outside of this hearing with anyone who has additional conversations, as well as looping in the attorney who has conducted all of the legal research. I just want to note a couple of things. One, for the record, I submitted a memo with recommended changes from our attorney, William Sherman, and I know that you are working to remedy those, to remedy the inconsistencies between the way the bill was drafted and the way that we have introduced and passed it on the national level. Two, just because prohibition of certain hairstyles is not explicitly stated does not mean that the discrimination does not exist. Thirdly, I would respectfully urge anyone to remember that just because you have not personally experienced discrimination or you do not know someone who has experienced it, that does not mean that it doesn't exist. And then lastly, I'll just note, second to last, respectfully, as an applied behavior analyst and doctoral candidate, I have had to demonstrate mastery of both qualitative and quantitative research. I have great respect for both traditions. With that, I cannot fathom a reason why extending statutory protection against this form of discrimination would not be overwhelmingly supported if even one case of race-based hair discrimination is reported. There appears to be the thought that it must be widespread in order for it to be something that should be implemented. And I would argue that even if there is one case, then passing the Crown Act to extend statutory protection to anyone who is on the receiving end of this type of discrimination would be something that you all would consider supporting. And then I want to just note, as it relates to whether or not this has been, whether or not there's existing protection. There is this issue between immutable and mutable. This is what has happened in the courts. Mutable meaning it can change, and then immutable meaning it cannot. What our lawyers have determined is that the courts have said, well, if you can change your hair, then it's not discrimination. And that's not what we want, because even if I can, we should not have to. So in the absence of the Crown Act, our hair is not currently protected under the current classification of race. What this bill does explicitly is it amends the existing definition of race without defining race, because we know there's no biological basis for it. It is something that is assumptive. We assume race. This bill amends that definition of race to include those traits that are historically associated with it, thereby covering hair. In the absence of the Crown Act, it does not cover our hair, because our hair is something that is thought of as something that can change. And we are arguing that our hair is a racial characteristic, which is why we are using this very explicit language. Again, thank you so much for having me. I am happy to answer any questions after this. I just need to get home to my mom, and it's getting dark, so I wanted to make sure that I was here. I thank you all for having me, and I look forward to the ongoing conversation and ultimately ensuring that the bill is passed.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heyliger, and thank you, Ms. Asamoah. Senator Francis Heyliger, point of personal privilege.
Thank you. First, I want to thank my colleagues for moving this piece of legislation forward to rules. It is a very important piece of legislation, and once in rules, I have taken to all the ideas and potential amendments that we will be putting forward, and all the suggestions that were made here today. Some of these individuals we did attempt to invite, but they could not make it. So we will do that in the Rules Committee, and I will guarantee, from my perspective, I will continue to fight for this piece of legislation, because discrimination has no place, whether in the U.S. or here in this territory, as it relates to our hair. That is a God-given attribute. Thank you so much for the support.
Thank you.